Another important concept that you have to understand is something called monoculture. Monoculture. Who wants to guess what this means? Let me give you a hint. Culture, agriculture, aquaculture. Culture means to grow something. Yeah.
The act of like growing crops.
Crops.
Wait.
But if it's mono means it's one,
Yeah. So
that means just one type.
Yeah.
One type of crop.
Oh.
The biggest crop that's being one of the major commodity crops that are being used for monoculture is corn. Corn. So 50%, over 50% of the corn that's being raised in these monocultures are being fed to the cows, the livestock. Now, what's problematic about monoculture? It's cheap to produce. Why? Because you have rows and rows of the same crop. You don't have to worry about, I have to tend to this crop or this crop. They're all playing on the same schedule. And all you need is these big tractors, these big heavy machinery to walk around or drive around the fields and harvest and water. And these sprays are usually pesticides and herbicides and chemicals. Why? Because if you only have one crop, one type of crop, then usually weeds, the other plants that you don't harvest, they grow on the bottom. Why? Because Earth, Mother Nature, wants diversity.
What do you mean by what do you mean by other crops?
Okay, so let's say you have a plot here that's only growing corn. And it's just hectares and hectares of corn. Mother Nature sees it as an imbalance. Uh-oh, why, what's going on here? Why is there only one crop in this area? So what Mother Nature will do is try to shoot out different plants for diversity. And diversity is important is because if you have only one type, then they're more vulnerable to diseases, they're more vulnerable to weather conditions. So Mother Nature will say, we need diversity. We need to have different things growing in this land, so it'll just shoot up weeds. But it's weeds to the humans. Why? Because we don't use that. And it's bad for the farmer. Why? Because these weeds, these plants, they'll suck up the nutrients from the soil. And that nutrient was supposed to go to where?
The crops.
The crops. So it's an unwanted guest for the farmer, but it was a necessity for Mother Nature. Does that make sense? So in order to kill all those weeds, they have to spray herbicides. They have to spray pesticides for insects that come in and eat the crop, thus decreasing the market value. If you go out to the market and say, hey, here's a corn that has a bunch of bites from insects, and another one that doesn't, which one is going to be sold at a higher price? The one that's perfectly looking fine. So farmers know that. They don't want a bunch of pests wrecking their harvest, so they'll spray chemical pesticides and herbicides to get rid of the weeds and get rid of the bugs. And more than half of it goes to feeding the animals. And once it's there, then we eat the animals, and all that chemicals and pesticides that the cows were eating, we're somehow getting it indirectly.
But isn't that how it affects us?
Was that?
But isn't that how it affects us?
It does affect us. It does.
Isn't it like only like a tiny bit?
Well, I don't know. The problem with these chemical pesticides is that they were made from petroleum, from fossil fuel, and they don't degrade. They don't break apart. So they just accumulate over time in your body. And who's at the top of the food chain?
Us.
We are. So we eat. That's what happens. Okay? So understand that monoculture is significant, and why do we have monoculture in the first place? Why? Because we have to feed all those animals in the CAFO lots. Before we had monoculture, before we had CAFOs, livestock and farming were done in one area. And what happened was the farmers would take the cow dung and spray it into the crop field, and that was fertilizer. Remember I told you we have nutrients in the soil, and it's not there forever. It's not like you have infinite supply. You have to replenish the soil with nutrients, right? But when the farm and the livestock were in one area, the farmer will take the cow dung and use it as compost and spray it onto the field, and it will replenish the soil with nutrients. But you can't have that anymore. Why? Because you have now a separate lot for monoculture for corn and a separate crop or a separate lot for just raising animals. So when the cow dung was actually a very, very important source of nutrients for the soil, for the farmers, now it's a waste. It's a hassle to get rid of it, and it's a big problem. So all these CAFOs, they are dumping a bunch of cow dung that would usually be used to replenish the soil. So it's a big issue. So far, so good?
Yes.
Everybody understand this?